Welcome to Signs of Life, exploring survival of consciousness. Brought to you by the Forever Family Foundation on the web at www.
Good evening, guys.
Good evening.
How you doing?
Hello.
I want to welcome all of you to the Signs of Life program brought to you by the Forever Family Foundation. And had a very interesting week last week with Dr. Radin here. A lot of responses, a lot of people really reacting to his very cerebral look at the physics of what he feels we have in our environment, to put it in the easiest form. I want to put a little hello out to Tracy from Westminster, California, who wrote us, and I guess, Phran, she writes us a lot.
She does.
She really does.
She is a regular listener, and she regularly has wonderful commentaries that she sends, unfortunately, later on in emails. And we'd love for her to take a few minutes and call in. But
yeah, and that's what we want to encourage everyone. Our phone number here is 631-955-5400. We get great emails, and we love the fact that people email us, but this is a call-in show. So that if you have something that strikes you the right way or even the wrong way, we want to see those phones light up because, truthfully, as a medium and even as Bob and Phran put it so well, you know, team science, when we want to get all these scientists together, we really want to question them on all of their work and why it is not all included with every scientist rather than them having their own separate work, so to speak. So if you do have a question, something hits you the right way, the wrong way, please call us on Signs of Life at 631-955-5400. But Tracy did write us this beautiful email, and at the end she really kind of asks an interesting question of something that happened last week. She writes, when Angelina told Will about his grandfather, and did his name come through, or was it a father figure or a man on the father's side of the family? Her big question is, why don't mediums actually hear the name of the discarnate? Like, why doesn't the discarnate just say, hi, my name is Will, and my grandson's name is Will, too? It's energy, and it's also the perception of the medium. Every medium has a different instrument, just like in life. There's different instruments that people can play, and they all have a different sound, and they all create a different vibration. Well, it's the same thing, too. You out there, you are instruments of energy, and you have a way of getting information, too, and you're going to pick it up a different way. Like myself as a medium, I'm very clairsentient, which is clear feeling. I'll feel something before I hear a name, although I do hear names. And I think the discarnate, what's interesting is the spirit knew to direct Will to something that had his name on it. You know, so it's very difficult for spirit or energy just to say their name, the energy that it takes to do that. And then you're dealing with the issue of the medium's perception of that message that they're trying to send. So I think sometimes you'll get names, sometimes I'll get last names. But you don't always get the name.
I do love the analogy that a lot of mediums make with music and vibrations.
Absolutely.
Because it always makes me think of the movie Close Encounters from many years ago.
Sure.
And how did he end up finally communicating was through music.
Through music. Music has a great vibration. And speaking of that, someone who's very good at music is Hollister Rand.
Oh, yes.
And she is a medium that's going to be coming, I believe, in October for the Forever Family Foundation. Isn't that right, Phran?
October 21st from 2 to 4:30 at the Huntington Hilton. It's a limited seating. I believe there are only 50 spots there.
Oh, wow.
And she's going to be doing spirit communications.
Very
And
nice.
It does include some light refreshments. And it's going to be a very nice Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, and Holly is a wonderful singer. And not only that, she taught a great workshop when we were in the Bahamas with Robert Brown about the how music holds a certain vibration and how if you resonate it within you, sometimes you could pick up on certain information or feel certain things. So it's very true how music, and the one way I meditate before I do a session is I'll sing. I'll go downstairs into my little area and I'll do a classic meditation, and then I'll sing a song because it raises my vibration.
Yeah, I think music is even singing in the shower. Doesn't it give you that emotional lift, even if you don't know how to sing?
Yeah, it's true. And it's a great thing to do, although my neighbors don't like it, but I certainly do. I do want to make a mention, too, of who we have on today. We have a full show, so we're not going to be chatting as much. We have Dr. Bruce Grayson that's going to be joining us shortly. He is really, I'm telling you, if you want to know anything about near-death experiences, this is the man for you. He is really one of the number one researchers to gather up data on near-death experiences. He's actually known as the father of NDE research, near-death experience research, and he'll be joining us in a few minutes. So until we do reach him, I'd like you to, again, write down that phone number, 631-955-5400 for the Signs of Life show, brought to you by the Forever Family Foundation. I also want to go through our website, www.foreverfamilyfoundation.org. There is chock full information of anything that you might be curious about. Books, isn't that correct? You have books listed there, certain mediums, as well as some events that are coming up. So it's really a full website.
Right. We even have some clips on there as you go through the pages. I know there's one particularly that is very, very moving, which is an interview with Jeff Kane on loss. And I think it's very healing for people who have suffered the loss of somebody close.
Yeah. You know, and what I find so striking is when you see someone like Jeff Kane, who is a very highly intellectual, strong-looking man. I'm always very moved and touched when I meet Jeff because he has this air of intellectual airness to him. I don't know how to put it. He's just full of intellect. But yet, when he talks about his son or when he talks about this work, it just connects everything. I think he's such a good fit with the foundation because of that. He really, really is quite an amazing man. So I would also check that out as well. There's also something else going on with the foundation, too. I wanted to talk about the Holiday Pass raffle. How's that going?
The raffle is going very, very well. And if you're gonna enter this is the raffle to enter because there's not just one winner. There are 10 winners.
Wow.
There are 10 one-hour phone readings with 10 mediums.
It's really something.
So you're never out of the race until that last name is pulled.
And plus all the money that is acquired from the raffle does go to the foundation, which is a not-for-profit, really going on that search for science and really trying to put science and spirituality together. And if you've ever had a loss in your life, I think that what I find hearing from the afterlife discussion groups and people who are involved with the foundation, it really is a wonderful place to go. So I'd like to remind you again of the website, www.foreverfamilyfoundation.org. Later on in the program, after we speak with Dr. Bruce Grayson, we are going to feature another not-for-profit in our community corner. The Phoenix Society for Burn Survivors is really quite a wonderful organization, and Frank McGonigal is going to be joining us near the end of the show, and we're going to talk about that particular society that does help people who have been affected by either they are a burn victim or families who have burn victims that are loved ones. So it is a great organization. And I want to remind you, too, that if you do have a not-for-profit out there, we don't want to chase you down. We are a not-for-profit organization, and we know how wonderful it is when we can get exposure, that we wanted to extend that to you as well. So if you're interested in being part of the Community Corner, please email us at radio@foreverfamilyfoundation.org. Again, that number is 631-955-5400. We are going to be taking a break right now, and when we come back, we are actually going to be speaking with Dr. Bruce Grayson. Again, he is known as the #1 researcher for near-death experiences. So we will be right back on Signs of Life, brought to you by the Forever Family Foundation.
With the nationwide insurance on-your-side experience, you'll enjoy quality insurance protection, personal service, and our signature blue ribbon claims. Guaranteed fair, guaranteed fast. If you've got a home and a car, Nationwide has great news for you. Right now, you could save hundreds of dollars every year on insurance for both. To find out if you qualify, contact your local Nationwide agent today. You deserve a faster, more convenient way to meet your insurance and financial needs. That's why we're here. Nationwide really does provide an on-your-side experience, guaranteed.
To find out how much you can save on your auto, home, or business insurance, call us at 516-766-4025. 516-766-4025.
Nationwide Mutual Insurance Company and affiliated companies. Life insurance issued by Nationwide Life Insurance Company, Columbus, Ohio. Nationwide is an equal housing opportunity insurer. Products and discounts subject to underwriting review and approval.
Has your marketing pitch been missing the strike zone? Maybe you need a new player to help your marketing efforts. At L&RProductions.com, you'll find a team that can give your broadcast advertising the winning edge. L&R Productions has produced award-winning jingles, radio and television commercials for many businesses just like yours. Radio and television advertising work, but you need the right game plan. Make sure you're getting the most out of your ad every time it airs. www.L&RProductions.com. We'll throw strikes for your business every time.
For years, people have been reporting communication from those no longer in our physical world. Historically, science and religion have taught us to ignore such messages. Yet, there is now substantial scientific evidence to the contrary. In response to this, the Forever Family Foundation has developed a sign registry to demonstrate the existence of this other dimension. On our website, people can register signs that they, after passing, plan on communicating to a specific loved one. Upon the registrant's passing, the stored information can be verified by the recipient of these signs. Participants will be taking part not only in a grand scientific experiment, but in providing the greatest gift of all, the knowledge that we survive our physical death. For more information, contact the Forever Family Foundation at 631-425-7707, or you can find us on the web at foreverfamilyfoundation.org. Or to register a sign, go directly to thesignregistry.com. I would like to introduce you to the Forever Family Foundation, a nonprofit organization whose mission is to provide a forum where individuals and families who have suffered the loss of a loved one can turn for support, information, and hope. We believe in the continuity of the family, even though a member has left the physical world. The Forever Family Foundation is a joint effort of scientists, research mediums, and interested people who support the premise that life does not end with physical death. We wish to prove that the bond of the family cannot be broken even by death. We invite anyone who's trying to cope with the loss of a loved one to contact the Forever Family Foundation at 631-425-7707. That's 631-425-7707. Or you can find us on the web at foreverfamilyfoundation.org.
Welcome back to Signs of Life, brought to you by the Forever Family Foundation.
And I'm your host, Angelina Diana, along with Bob and Phran Ginsberg. And welcome back to the program. And I'm really excited to welcome our next guest, Dr. Bruce Grayson, to the Signs of Life program. He holds the esteemed title of Carlson Professor of Psychiatry and serves as the Director of Division of Perceptual Studies in the Department of Psychiatric Medicine at the University of Virginia Health System. He's one of the first researchers to gather empirical data on the near-death experiences using accepted scientific methods. He's made more than 60 scientific presentations at the national regional conferences. He's also received 9 research grants. He's published more than 60 articles in peer-reviewed scholarly journals and is co-author of the book, The Near-Death Experience, Problems, Prospects, and Perspectives. Welcome to the program, Dr. Grayson.
Thank you, Angelina. I'm delighted to be with you tonight.
You know, I have to admit that's a mouthful of things. I was almost needing to take many breaths to talk about your accomplishments. That's quite an amazing titles that you have.
Thank you.
You also had some experience at UConn in Connecticut, did you not?
That's right. I was there for about 11 years at the UConn Health Center in Farmington.
Wow, that's in my backyard. It's really neat. Now, for our listeners, and by the way, I want to remind you that you can call in at 631-955-5400 to speak to Dr. Grayson. Can you relate for our listeners a definition of near-death experience?
Well, it's kind of hard to define, but a near-death experience is an unusual experience that people have when they do come close to death or sometimes are pronounced dead, that involves things such as leaving the physical body, seeing the body from a different perspective, sometimes having a review of your entire life, encountering deceased loved ones, encountering a being of light, a deity, and at some point coming to a decision to return to life or being sent back involuntarily.
So there's many different layers to a near-death experience.
There are indeed, yes.
So in your research, what have you found the most common experience? Is there one thing that basically runs through each experience that's common with people?
Well, there's nothing that's found in every single near-death experience. There is a lot of individuality. The thing that's probably the most common is a sense of overwhelming peace and well-being that people have during the experience.
That's very comforting. Do you also find that in your research that many people that have near-death experiences are a certain personality type?
Not at all. We see people of all different personality types, all different religious beliefs, degrees of religiosity, and it doesn't seem to affect whether you're going to have a near-death experience or what kind you're going to have.
Hi, Dr. Grayson. It's Bob Ginsberg.
How are you, Bob?
Good. You know, in reading all the research, I'm always struck by the term. I mean, it seems to me that maybe we should be calling it a death experience instead of a near-death experience. I mean, what's the current medical thinking as to when one is considered to be dead?
Well, that's a problem because the definition keeps changing with our technology. It's like you keep moving the goalposts as the people keep trying to score a goal. We used to say that when you were not breathing or your heart wasn't beating, that was death. But many people reached that criterion and then came back to tell about it, so we had to move the goalposts. And we keep doing that. Now the current standard is what they call brain death, flat brain waves, and we see people coming back from that and telling about near-death experiences. So I'm afraid we'll have to move the goalpost a little farther now.
Now, do you find that there's a common thought that, actually an argument, that people claim that the actual experience is manufactured by the brain? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's a common assumption by people who don't want to acknowledge anything other than the material world, that if everything comes from the brain, therefore the near-death experience must also. But although there's been lots of speculation, there are absolutely no data associating the near-death experience with any brain dysfunction. And in fact, for brain dysfunctions, you have clouded thinking, confusion, usually very frightening experiences, things very unlike the calm, consistent things we hear reported by near-death experiencers. It's actually a real problem for the brain-mind identity theory that we have people who say that their minds are functioning better than ever at a time when their brain is shutting down.
It's interesting. So there's actually more clarity seemingly more clarity when someone has a near-death experience because they could explain it so much.
Exactly, and that's something that the material model of brain and mind being the same thing just can't explain.
That's really a good argument. So all you naysayers out there, I hope you heard that last comment. I want to remind our listeners that we're speaking with Dr. Bruce Grayson. You can contact us at 631-955-5400. Now, Doctor, I understand also that you've not only studied near-death experiences, but you're also doing an interesting study, I believe, with heart patients right now. Isn't there an interesting experiment that you've?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes. One of the real problems with near-death research is that it's all what we call retrospective, is looking backwards. We start with people who have had an experience in the past and try to reconstruct from their memories what happened. And the data would be a lot more significant if we could do what we call a prospective study, looking at people before they have the experience and then following them through the experience and afterwards. And that requires us to know who's going to have a near-death experience, which is very difficult to do.
Right.
But I have that with this group of cardiac patients. These are people who repeatedly have what cardiologists call sudden death episodes, where their hearts stop. And they try to deal with this by implanting in the patient's chest what they call an automatic cardioverted defibrillator. It's a small device that they put in the chest that will monitor the heart rate. And as long as the heart is going in a normal rhythm, it does nothing but monitor it. But if the patient should go into cardiac arrest, this little device would automatically pick that up and deliver a shock to defibrillate them to bring them back into a normal rhythm. Now, when they put this device in, the only way they can test whether it works is to intentionally induce a cardiac arrest to make the heart stop and then watch to see whether the device will actually work. So here we have a situation where we know exactly when someone is going to go into a cardiac arrest. So we can study them beforehand, have them go into this near-death state, see if they have a near-death experience, and then test them afterwards and see if they are, in fact, changed as a result of this experience.
Now, as far as getting the assistance of, I'm really fascinated that you were able to get other MDs to agree to be a part of this. What are your feelings about the regular medical field and how they're starting to adapt to survival of consciousness experiments, looking into that? What is your experience with that?
Well, I find that physicians and scientists are just like everybody else, and you see the entire range of attitudes toward this type of research among physicians. Some people think it's the most important thing you can possibly study, and some people think it's a waste of time. Now, I have seen a great change in the last 20 or 30 years.
That's encouraging.
And I think if we tried to do a study like this one 30 years ago, it would be hard to find a cardiologist willing to go along with it. But now there's so much known about near-death experiences that patients are more willing to tell their doctors about them.
Mm-hmm.
So the cardiologists I work with have heard these accounts from many of their patients. They know that they happen, and they know that they're very important to their patients. So they want to know more about them, and they're very eager to go along with the research.
You know, Dr. Grayson, sometimes we'll have conversations with people, and it'll come out that, you know, they have had an experience where they were clinically dead and revived, and they do not recall any type of vision or tunnel or any what we would consider to be a near-death experience. And then they'll say to me, well, I have proof that there is no afterlife, and I have proof that there is no such thing as a near-death experience. And I think it's a misconception that a lot of people have that I guess portrayed by the media, that as soon as you are clinically dead and then revived, you know, you go through this tunnel. I mean, what is the actual percentage of people in these circumstances that have these near-death experiences? Is there a set percentage that you've discovered?
Yes, we are finding a percentage now. I've done a study in the United States, and there have been studies done in England and in Holland that are all showing that if you look at people who have a documented cardiac arrest, about 10 to 20% of those people will have a near-death experience. That means that 80 or 90% will not remember anything. So it's still a minority of people that will remember anything. And that's not too surprising, because we know that when people's hearts stop, that the oxygen is stopped going to the brain, and they're not going to be able to lay down memories that they can retrieve later on. So it's actually surprising that so many people do remember near-death experiences.
So it's possible that there are a great number of people that are having them. It's just the recall is the problem.
Exactly.
Yeah. Out of that 10 or 20% that do have an experience, what percentage of them describe this tunnel? Is that a common theme, or is that?
It's not terribly common. I'd say probably 20 or 30% will describe the tunnel.
Mm-hmm. And maybe the same percentage that see deceased relatives?
Yes, yes.
You know, I think this would be a good time if you could recount the Pam Reynolds case to our listeners. It's a very fascinating case. Would you mind sharing that with our listeners?
I sure would. I'll try to keep it brief, though. It's a very involved case. Pam Reynolds was a woman who had an aneurysm at the base of her brain. Now, that's an area of a blood vessel where it balloons out because of intense pressure in the blood vessel and a weak vessel wall. So the artery balloons out like an old-fashioned automobile tire that was about to blow out. And this is a very serious condition. If it bursts, then the person will bleed to death immediately. And the only thing you can do about this is surgically treat it. But when you have a giant aneurysm, as this one was, it's too risky to go in there and operate on it. So what they did, it's a very dramatic procedure called hypothermic circulatory arrest. And they essentially drained the blood out of her brain so that there was no pressure on the aneurysm. And in that circumstance, they can go in there and safely cut it out. Now, in order to do that, normally you can't go for more than 4 or 5 minutes without blood to the brain without getting some severe brain damage. So they do two things to this woman first. One is that they give her barbiturates, which slow down the brain metabolism, and then they cool her body down to about 60 degrees Fahrenheit. at which point your brain requires much less oxygen to function. Once they have that happening, once they have her cooled down, they drain all the blood out of her brain, essentially out of her body, and then they go in and start the operation, which takes 45 to 60 minutes.
Wow.
So she is essentially dead for that 45-minute period. She has no heartbeat. She's not breathing. There's obviously no blood going to her brain. And in fact, they have electric probes going deep into the brainstem to measure what's going on in the brain. And there's actually absolutely no response in there at all for this whole hour-long period. Now, for this woman, Pam Reynolds, at the time when she had this experience, this circulatory arrest, and was dead by all our usual criteria, she had a very elaborate near-death experience. It included hovering over the operating table, and she described several unusual things that were happening that couldn't have been predicted in advance about the operating scene. She also went through the tunnel, saw the light, met several deceased relatives, and had the typical blissful near-death experience.
And there's also, did she not describe seeing a sneaker out on the ledge?
No, that was
that another case? Okay,
right.
Yeah.
But she did describe several unexpected things. For example, when they were doing the surgery, they also have to cut down into her veins in her legs for this, and they started cutting down on the veins in the right leg, and discovered that they were too small. They couldn't do the operation, so they had to close it up and move over to the left side of her body.
Mm-hmm.
And she saw that whole thing and reported that whole thing.
Wow.
That's not something that could have been predicted in advance.
Yeah. So what's so striking about this case is that there's no possible explanation that one can think of. Every sensory biological function was shut down, including her reflexes, her brain functions, and yet she describes these extremely descriptive sensory experiences.
Right.
It's very hard to make sense of it.
That's right. There was absolutely no brain activity for this hour-long period, and yet she has vivid memories of what was happening during that time.
Wow.
And to have all the hookups and everything to her brain to actually see no activity there's that argument that we opened up this whole discussion with, which is the argument about brain function supposedly creating near-death experiences. So that's really quite a striking case.
Yes.
Now, in your years, how long have you been researching near-death experiences, Doctor?
A little more than 30 years.
Wow. And what made you want to go into this field?
Well, I was kind of in the right place at the right time. The near-death experience was named by Raymond Moody back in 1975. We had heard accounts of these things beforehand, but we didn't have a name for them, and therefore people didn't think to report them very frequently. But Moody wrote a book in 1975 called Life After Life that put a name and put a description to these phenomena. And at that time, he was in his psychiatric training working under me at the University of Virginia. And he started getting letters from people all over the world, astounded that they were not the only person that had this experience happen to them. And since he was still in his training, he didn't really have the time to deal with these letters, so he gave me the letters to read. And once I started looking at them, I just couldn't put them down.
Wow.
And now 30 years have passed.
So as a doctor, how did you go about making the transition to experimenting? I mean, how do you go from an interest of studying this to say, okay, now I need to construct something to actually try to prove some data?
Very, very slowly.
But how did you make the transition? I'm curious what your next step was after that.
Well, actually, for most of those 30 years, I've been working as a clinical psychiatrist as my main job and just doing this near-death research on the side.
Wow.
But gradually, as we've accumulated more and more information about these experiences, we've been able to get better and better about designing our research protocols that may help us understand them, like the one I mentioned before with the internal defibrillators. We couldn't have thought about that 30 years ago until we knew more about the experience and what it was like.
So now that you have all this data, do you believe in an afterlife?
You know, that's a tough question.
Okay. I always put the scientists on the line.
He was hoping that you wouldn't ask
I know. But that's okay. I'm just
curious. You got
curious.
to remember, you're talking to a scientist
I
into a position, and
know.
I'm very skeptical to begin with.
I know.
But I can tell you that I've seen and heard things that I just don't have an explanation for. And I know that the usual materialistic explanations we have for this, like the brain is causing this, just don't explain a thing about this experience.
Okay.
The experience that the interpretation that the experiencers themselves give us is unequivocally that they think they died and saw a taste of the afterlife. And that explanation certainly explains the phenomenon as well as any other explanation we have.
Answered like a true scientist, I have to say. Beautifully put. We are going to be taking a break. I do want to remind our listeners that we are speaking with Dr. Bruce Grayson, and if you do have a question on near-death experiences, that number to call is 631-955-5400. And when we come back from the break, Dr. Grayson, we will be speaking to Linda from Wantagh. She has a question for you, so we'll be back on Signs of Life.
Has your marketing pitch been missing the strike zone? Maybe you need a new player to help your marketing efforts. At LRProductions.com, you'll find a team that can give your broadcast advertising the winning edge. L&R Productions has produced award-winning jingles, radio and television commercials for many businesses just like yours. Radio and television advertising work, but you need the right game plan. Make sure you're getting the most out of your ad every time it airs. www.LRProductions.com. We'll throw strikes for your business every time.
I would like to introduce you to the Forever Family Foundation, a nonprofit organization whose mission is to provide a forum where individuals and families who have suffered the loss of a loved one can turn for support, information, and hope. We believe in the continuity of the family, even though a member has left the physical world. The Forever Family Foundation is a joint effort of scientists, research mediums, and interested people who support the premise that life does not end with physical death. We wish to prove that the bond of the family cannot be broken even by death. We invite anyone who's trying to cope with the loss of a loved one to contact the Forever Family Foundation at 631-425-7707. That's 631-425-7707. Or you can find us on the web at foreverfamilyfoundation.org.
With the Nationwide Insurance On Your Side experience, you'll enjoy quality insurance protection, personal service, and our signature blue ribbon claims. Guaranteed fair, guaranteed fast. More than just a source for quality insurance, our agents are a part of the community. After all, local service is our policy. They're trained to listen, explain, and offer individual solutions as unique as the clients they serve. Contact your local Nationwide agent today. You deserve a faster, more convenient way to meet your insurance needs. That's why we're here. Nationwide really does provide an on-your-side experience, guaranteed.
To find out how much you can save on your auto, home, or business insurance, call us at 516-766-4025. 516-766-4025.
Nationwide Mutual Insurance Company and affiliated companies. Life insurance issued by Nationwide Life Insurance Company, Columbus, Ohio.
For years, people have been reporting communication from those no longer in our physical world. Historically, science and religion have taught us to ignore such messages. Yet, there is now substantial scientific evidence to the contrary. In response to this, the Forever Family Foundation has developed a sign registry to demonstrate the existence of this other dimension. On our website, people can register signs that they, after passing, plan on communicating to a specific loved one. Upon the registrant's passing, the stored information can be verified by the recipient of these signs. Participants will be taking part not only in a grand scientific experiment, but in providing the greatest gift of all, the knowledge that we survive our physical death. For more information, contact the Forever Family Foundation at 631-425-7707, or you can find us on the web at foreverfamilyfoundation.org. Or to register a sign, go directly to thesignregistry.com.
Welcome back to Signs of Life, brought to you by the Forever Family Foundation.
And I'm your host, Angelina Diana, along with Bob and Phran Ginsberg, and we are speaking with Dr. Bruce Grayson. Hello, Dr. Grayson.
Lena.
I'm glad you're still there. I'd like to know if you'd like to take a call. Linda from Wantagh has a question from you. Hi, Linda.
Yes, hi, good evening. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing great. You're speaking with Dr. Grayson.
Hello, Dr. Grayson.
Hi, Linda.
Hi. I'm very interested in your research on near-death experiences. I have to tell you, I'm a nurse for over 30 years, primarily in critical care. So we've experienced some patients who have reported near-death experiences, And right now I'm curious about the research with the patients undergoing the ICD implants.
Yes.
Are the patients informed before, the ones that are involved in the study?
No, they're not. They're told that we're going to be studying their psychological reactions.
Right.
And we do some interviews with them beforehand, and then after we ask them what they remember about the procedure.
Right.
But we don't tell them what particularly we're looking for.
I see. I believe earlier you stated the response to the patients that did suffer a cardiac arrest was about approximately 20% reportable.
About 10 to 20% will report near-death experiences.
Right.
Yes.
Did you see an increase with the patients enrolled in the ICD study?
No, in fact, we are not seeing them with the patients in the ICD study. And there are several reasons for that, I think. One is that the patients are all given a medication called midazolam that tends to interfere with memory.
Uh-huh.
And
that's what Ursed?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Another is that the device is so efficient that they're only in cardiac arrest for 4 to 8 seconds.
Right.
And we know you need at least 10 seconds to get brainwave changes from a cardiac arrest.
Uh-huh.
So these are things working against them being able to have and remember a near-death experience to report to us.
Right.
Well, thank you. That was excellent questions.
Yeah.
Thank you, Linda.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
Doctor, I'm curious. Are there similar hookups, or I don't even know the proper term, to the brain waves for these particular patients as there were, say, in the Pam Reynolds case?
No, they don't routinely measure the brain waves in these patients.
Because it would be interesting to see if there's the same depth of, I don't even know, I'm not a neurologist, but the same depth of less activity compared.
Yes, it certainly would. If we had been finding a large number of near-death experiences, that would have been our next step, to start measuring what's going on in the brain during this process.
Now, I'm really wondering, one of the possible theories that I know we had from the gentleman last week was that some of the experiences could be more of a psi experience. How do you disprove that theory? If you can.
Well,
is that the million-dollar question?
Actually, I don't think you can, because the way some people interpret psi, there are virtually no limits to it, so it's not a disprovable theory. They can essentially attribute anything to psi.
Interesting. Where were you last week? Because I would have liked to have said that to Dr. Radin. It's very interesting.
Well, we had Dean Radin on last week as a wonderful guest.
Yes.
I know that one of his theories regarding psi phenomenon is that there's not a signal sent out per se from a sender to a receiver that could be picked up or measured, but maybe our minds are just entangled with one another, and it's just a correlated mind theory as opposed to signal. So, I was wondering, possibly whether an NDE falls into this realm of, or the same category as psi. We just don't know.
Well, it could well be. I mean, there's no reason to think that there's actual communication from one being to another, as opposed to just sort of a mind melding, the two merging in some way.
Yeah. Of course, as you know, I mean, our foundation has a great interest in survival research.
Yes.
And what I was thinking about is, in comparing, for instance, I personally think that near-death experience research is the best route to, one day finding a link to a possible afterlife. But, when you examine near-death experiences and you see people that have these, sometimes some percentage of people see deceased relatives at the same time when their systems are shut down, and then we look at people who have these deathbed visions. And recently I heard another term from pre-death visions, but essentially the same thing. And they're conscious, I mean, their health is not good. Obviously, they're about to die, but their senses are still functioning. And they seem to report, seeing deceased relatives. And then we have people that are in deep meditations, and then mediums that have done research, and they're perfectly healthy, and they see, deceased relatives, and I'm trying to find some common denominator, and I don't know if there is one.
Well, I'm not sure there is either.
Yeah.
It's clear that coming close to death is a fairly reliable trigger for these experiences, but they also happen in a lot of other situations, as you were mentioning. They happen sometimes with deep meditation. Sometimes they come to us in dreams. So coming close to death isn't the only way to have one of these experiences.
Right. Most of these, I know you're very interested in people that the after effects of having a near-death experience, and what do you find? I mean, the people do they consider it to be a spiritual experience, or is their life affected?
Yes, very definitely. I've talked to people several decades after the experience, and they all say it's like it happened yesterday. The effects have never faded. The most common thing we hear from people is that they are no longer afraid of death after this experience. No matter what their NDE was like, they come back thinking that death is not the end, it's not something to be afraid of. And that's a wonderfully reassuring thing for a lot of them. And paradoxically, if they're not afraid of dying, they're also not afraid of living more fully. And they tend to enjoy life more because they're not afraid to take risks. They also report being less concerned with worldly things, with earthly things like money, material possessions, power, prestige, and more concerned with spiritual things, with altruistic good deeds, with relationships rather than objects.
It's a beautiful thing. Dr. Grayson, we do have a caller on the line. He'd like to actually share an experience that he had.
Great.
Let's speak to Lenny from Massapequa Park. Lenny?
Hi, how you doing, Angelina?
Good, Lenny. How are you?
Alrighty, how you doing, Bob?
Okay.
Fran?
Great.
Hi, Lenny.
Dr. Grayson?
Yes.
I had a defibrillator put in January.
Mm-hmm.
And went through, what you're discussing here.
Yes.
For me, it wasn't sort of like it wasn't an out-of-body experience or anything like that. But I did feel where you kind of, I'm only speaking for myself. I'm sure everybody's different, but
right.
I felt a very, very focused, straight kind of looking effect where you don't have peripheral vision. You're kind of focused, almost pinpointed, and it's a very, very rushed type of situation. It's almost like you're being sent through a vacuum or a funnel.
Yes.
Is the only way I could explain it. It's a very, very fast-moving feeling. It only takes seconds, of course, but you don't know how long you're out. But
that's right.
For me, I did find one thing that I did notice was patients. A patient before me would let out a yell as they returned, and I found myself that I did the same exact thing, where you sort of hear sound before you can actually see or visualize things. Mm-hmm. So when you first come back, you're hearing almost like sound. I don't know if it was sound from the people that were in the room at the time, or if it was just in my own mind. But it was just,
right.
You could hear sounds, and then you kind of almost like pop into the area. It's kind of and you come back with where you're almost scared. Like you come back oof, it's kind of like a burst into the situation.
Right.
And the same thing, like I said, it happened, because it got me a little nervous because the person before me, you let out a yell, so I didn't know what to expect when it was my turn. But you come back sort of really fast.
Yeah.
Is that very common, Doctor, or is that something that you've heard before from people who have experienced what would be an NDE?
No, it isn't. It isn't.
Interesting.
I'm wondering, Lenny, how did you interpret this focus pinpoint the vision? What did you think that was going on then?
I don't know. I really I wasn't thinking about anything, to tell you the truth, other than they did tell me to think of something, sort of relaxing or like a nice, pleasant, feeling or mood. And I just kind of set myself with, water and trees and stuff like that. And that's kind of what I was thinking about.
Right.
Which went right out. I mean, and the next thing I know, it was like I said, a very fast-moving. It's almost like your ears. I don't want to say pop, but the sound is like muffled, and then it kind of comes on fast, and you just, like I said, it's kind of like you rushed and you just pop right into it.
I'm very curious about that pop sound because I've heard that from other people that have experienced NDEs. I'm not a researcher. I had an NDE myself and had a similar thing happen. So I'm very curious if that would be somewhat from a layperson's term of the spirit going back into the body, that rushed feeling and that boom feeling of being back into consciousness. You've not heard anything of that before, Dr. Grayson?
Well, I've heard people say that they themselves experienced that sense of pop.
Yeah. Okay.
But I haven't heard other people around the person
say
they heard an audible sound.
Okay, so that's what Lenny was saying. He heard the audible sound. Okay.
Yeah.
No, I heard it.
I thought he did. Yeah.
I heard it as I was, coming back.
Yeah. So he heard it.
I don't think any, I didn't ask anyone around me.
Okay.
There,
yes.
But I
understand.
That's very interesting, Lenny. Thank you so much for sharing that story. I really appreciate it.
Okay, you're welcome. And it's a great show, by the way.
No, thank you.
I listen all the time.
Well, we have to thank Dr. Grayson for that. He's a wonderful guest. Now, I understand, too, that you've received 9 research grants in your experience.
Yes.
Okay. If you had the opportunity, if tomorrow you woke up and somebody handed you $1 million check after you passed out, maybe
had an NDE.
That's true. Maybe that might help the research. But I'm wondering, what kind of an experiment would you like to form?
Well, first let me say that $1 million doesn't go nearly as far as you might think it would.
Okay, $5 million.
But actually, there is an international consortium of researchers that are talking about this right now.
Really?
We're getting together and looking at what work really needs to be done. And there's a group of people, including several cardiologists, Pim van Lommel in Holland, neuropsychiatrist Peter Fenwick in England, cardiologist Sam Parnia in New York, a neuroimager Mario Beauregard in Montreal, and we're planning the next step in the research, and it's looking at the same type of hypothermic circulatory arrest situation that Pam Reynolds went through.
Okay.
And we're going to do a cross-cultural study looking at people in different societies to see whether we find the same phenomena in all these different settings.
That's very interesting. Have you found in the past that someone's culture might change their experience?
It doesn't exchange the experience itself, but it does change how people describe it.
Interesting.
For example, people in the United States will talk about going through a tunnel. People in third world countries don't usually use that term. There aren't a lot of tunnels there. But they will talk about going into a cave or going into a well. So your cultural background does color how you describe things.
I went into a bus, so that tells you a lot about my culture. How interesting is that? Well, Dr. Grayson, I had the opportunity of meeting you at Duke University,
yes.
and you are just really not only an amazing researcher, but an amazing man. And I really want to thank you for
thank you,
the time that you spent with us. The UVA website, it's www.healthsystems.virginia.edu.
That's
Is
right.
that correct? So please check that out. There's really a bevy of researchers working under your wing, and I, as a person that's very interested in this work, I want to thank you for all the years of research you've done, and thank you so much for being part of Signs of Life.
Well, thank you, Angelina.
And take care of yourself.
Sure.
We're going to take a very short break, maybe about a minute or two, and then when we come back, we're going to be speaking to Frank McConicle with Community Corner on Signs of Life.
I would like to introduce you to the Forever Family Foundation, a nonprofit organization whose mission is to provide a forum where individuals and families who have suffered the loss of a loved one can turn for support, information, and hope. We believe in the continuity of the family, even though a member has left the physical world. The Forever Family Foundation is a joint effort of scientists, research mediums, and interested people who support the premise that life does not end with physical death. We wish to prove that the bond of the family cannot be broken even by death. We invite anyone who's trying to cope with the loss of a loved one to contact the Forever Family Foundation at 631-425-7707. That's 631-425-7707. Or you can find us on the web at foreverfamilyfoundation.org.
With the Nationwide Insurance On Your Side experience, you'll enjoy quality insurance protection, personal service, and our signature blue ribbon claims. Guaranteed fair, guaranteed fast. If you've got a home and a car, Nationwide has great news for you. Right now, you could save hundreds of dollars every year on insurance for both. To find out if you qualify, contact your local Nationwide agent today. You deserve a faster, more convenient way to meet your insurance and financial needs. That's why we're here. Nationwide really does provide an on-your-side experience, guaranteed.
To find out how much you can save on your auto, home, or business insurance, call us at 516-766-4025. 516-766-4025.
Nationwide Mutual Insurance Company and affiliated companies. Life insurance issued by Nationwide Life Insurance Company, Columbus, Ohio. Nationwide is an equal housing opportunity insurer. Products and discounts subject to underwriting review and approval.
Welcome back to Signs of Life, brought to you by the Forever Family Foundation.
And I'm your host, Angelina Diana, along with Bob and Phran Ginsberg. And you know, many burn survivors say that one of the most significant influences in the recovery comes from meeting others who've experienced the pain and suffering. And we'd like to take the opportunity to welcome Frank McGonigal to the program, who is involved in an organization called the Phoenix Society for Burn Survivors. Good evening, Frank.
Good evening, Angelina and Phran and Bob.
Good
evening.
Hi, Frank.
Thank you.
Am I broadcasting all right?
You're broadcasting loud and clear, Frank.
Okay.
Thank you so much for taking time to speak with us, especially about the Phoenix Society of Burn Survivors. I had the opportunity to meet you at a retreat from Robert Brown in the Bahamas, and I have to tell you that when you spoke about this society, it really touched our hearts. So can you explain to us what the society is and how it helps people who have been affected by being burned?
Well, the society takes its name from the legendary bird of, I guess, Egyptian fame that plunges into the fire and regenerates itself and rises more beautiful than before.
Wow.
And that is sort of the symbolic interpretation of what we try to do. We don't attempt to make burn survivors or burn victims more beautiful, because that gets to be quite a challenge. But spiritually, personally, emotionally can be more beautiful than before the burn. So that's the idea. The society has much more to do with peer support. Working with these are the members of this society are more often than not burn survivors themselves, or family members or friends, members of the medical profession that are involved with burn care, and working with the newly burned people, who we call survivors rather than victims, because it has a better connotation, and working with their families and friends to help get them back to a productive life.
It's beautiful. And for those of you that are listening via the internet, you can check out their website at www.phoenix-society.org. Frank, what are some of the programs, if you can give us an example on what it would be like? Maybe there's someone out there that's been affected by this and that they are looking for a place to go. What would it be like for someone who gets in contact with your organization?
It would depend on where they live. There are organizations, oftentimes in conjunction with burn unit, hospital units, and other medical care organizations that sponsor meetings, which would be peer support kind of meetings. In Boston, for instance, we have one every month. There's an annual meeting, a burn survivor conference that takes place. It just took place in Sacramento, California. The website is available, and you gave the URL for both information, and there's a chat room on the website. So what we found that burn survivors meeting other burn survivors who've been through similar circumstances and challenges is a real healing kind of experience.
Now, I also notice, of course, you also welcome the family members and the friends as well. What type of advocacy programs do you offer, or have you had to get involved in? Because I understand that, especially maybe being part of the hospital system, or even just knowing what's available through your state or local agencies. Do you offer anything in that vein?
There's not legal advice per se, but we have resources to let the people who are burned and their families know what they should be entitled to from an insurance standpoint, from governmental aid, any of that. Because burns are not only devastating from a physical standpoint, but they're financially disastrous.
I can only imagine.
And unfortunately, most of the people who are burned wind up not having any kind of compensation for that. They're oftentimes in poverty before they get burned, and if they're not out of it, it's no surprise.
Wow.
Because of the cost of the burns, and oftentimes they lose employment, and a lot of tragedy beyond the medical tragedy.
I can only imagine. Again, we're speaking to Frank from the Phoenix Society. Again, www.phoenix-society.org. Frank, do you have any annual fundraisers or things that you do to try to raise money? Because you are a 501c3 like we are. So
we know things. There are around the country. There are different events. There's a marathon in Boston that's going to be done. There's a golf tournaments. Variety of events for local fundraising, and most of them oftentimes they involve local firefighters in fundraising. Usually these organizations that sponsor burn support groups in the hospitals do a fundraising a variety of ways. As far as on the national level, we have an annual fund campaign and raise money through that. We don't operate on a large budget, so we try to make every dollar go very far, and I think about 90% of what we take in goes directly to help the burn survivors rather than administrative costs.
Well, Frank, I have to say it's a really fantastic organization and a fantastic thing that the Phoenix Society is doing, and I want to thank you for joining us on Science of Life.
Thank you for giving us a chance to tell our story, and if there's anyone out there who has burn survivor friends who may be in need of some sort of assistance, get on the website and it's a good way to connect and find out what resources are available. So thanks very much, Angelina and Phran and Bob. And I heard your NDE show and really enjoyed it.
Well, thank you, Frank.
Thank you for doing what you do.
Thank you. And again, that's at www.phoenix-society.org. Thank you so much. And also I want to mention, we did highlight another organization, COPE. They are going to be having the COPE Walk on Sunday, September 17th, at 11:30 a.m. on Long Beach Boardwalk. And if you'd like more information on that, you can go to www.copefoundation.org or call the COPE line at 516-364-COPE. And we know what that music means. This hour has flew by, incredibly flew by. I want to thank Bob and Phran and The Other Side and Science for bringing us all together again this week. Please join us again next week. Do we know what guest is on next week? Offhand?
Dr. Julie Beischel, who does mediumship research.
And if you love Dr. Gary Schwartz, you're going to love Julie. So please join us next week. And remember that your loved ones are a heartbeat away, and science is going to prove it.
I would like to introduce you to the Forever Family Foundation, a nonprofit organization whose mission is to provide a forum where individuals and families who have suffered the loss of a loved one can turn for support, information, and hope. We believe in the continuity of the family, even though a member has left the physical world. The Forever Family Foundation is a joint effort of scientists, research mediums, and interested people who support the premise that life does not end with physical death. We wish to prove that the bond of the family cannot be broken even by death. We invite anyone who's trying to cope with the loss of a loved one to contact the Forever Family Foundation at 631-425-7707. That's 631-425-7707. Or you can find us on the web at foreverfamilyfoundation.org.